Happy New Year!
Happy New Year! We are back, and it's 2025, and it's good to be here. It's good to be here, Evie.
Yeah,
and good to be here
it
with you.
doesn't feel like an extra year, does it? Like it feels like we just started these discussions. Really,
Absolutely,
amazing.
It was. Actually, I was going back and looking at. We started the discussions around about July last year, so I can't believe that we spent half of last year really talking about mental fitness, the impact of positive intelligence, etc. It just seems to have flown, but then last year kind of did fly, and on the basis that this
flow,
even flow, but on the basis that this one may also fly, I want to make sure that we get as much in as we possibly can. We are going to, share as much of the love and the joy as we can, because that's kind of what we're about, and that's what we want to do. So it's great to be here with you. For anyone who's tuning in, Happy New Year to you too. Great to have you with us. And we will be continuing our conversations. Evie, what are we chatting about today?
Well, because of the holidays and things, and there is something that comes up quite often, like the being alone thing. And for some people, it is like a state, really. I mean, they dread the holidays because they don't have somebody to share with and all these things. However, the I am alone sense could show up even when you are with a lot of people, even if you are within a community that don't really resonate with you, even when you just think that your thoughts and who you are doesn't really align with the people that you have around you. So there is a lot to unpack there, and we chose that topic, but we are going to look into it through the various saboteurs, like we always do, just so you can see what this story is and if it's really true or not, because there might be a sense of not truth in there.
Absolutely. So we spent a lot of our previous conversations looking at I am not enough, because that probably, for me, that almost is underlying to all of these other things that we talk about. It's probably the most common one that I hear, that sense, that feeling of I'm not enough, for all the different reasons. And we looked at that through all of the different saboteurs. So just as you said, Evie, we'll do the same with I am alone. And you're right, it's such an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think that the holidays really amplifies that feeling. So if you're already feeling I'm alone in any shape or form, when the holidays come, it can be amplified. And it's not simply because you are on your own. It's because you may even be with family members, and family members who you love, but they don't get you. They don't hear you. They don't know what you're doing, and all that kind of stuff. So it always feels a little disjointed, and you always feel a little bit left out of. And it's almost like, well, I'm here thinking and feeling the things that I do, and all these other people are thinking and feeling something very different. So what's wrong with me? Can be that thing that tends to come up. And I was trying to think about myself and think, when does that come up for me? And I think the only time that I can really say I am alone came up for me was probably, and I go back to that period of my life. I was 38, everything was going AWOL in my life. And I was very good at holding it down and holding it together. But the internal dialogue was very much, I'm alone. I've got no one to talk to, which again, I can now see was ridiculous. That was what I was telling myself, because I was in so much discomfort with all the things that I was thinking and was feeling. My family have been like my best support network ever. But at the time, that just didn't seem like a place to go. It didn't feel available to me. And that had nothing to do with them. That was to do with me. That was to do with the stories I was telling myself. That was to do with the degree of discomfort I was feeling. That was to do with the guilt I was feeling because of all the stuff that was going on. So, yeah, there is that interesting, what is it you're telling yourself and what's really driving that? Are you really alone, or is there something that's happening? Is it a circumstance? Is it a thought about yourself? Is it a thought about other people that's actually driving that?
It is really similar to like feeling invisible in a way. And when you are feeling like that, you're not going to easily reach out, ask for help, or say what you really think, because you're feeling that you are alone. And it is like remarkable how your story, Yvonne, really resonates with some of the things that I felt throughout my life. Feeling that I really cannot follow the path that was expected to follow, and that in some respects, especially when I was much younger, it felt very uncomfortable. So I couldn't really share what I wanted to do and how I wanted to do it, and that made me feel very alone. And I think in many respects, it can be cultural as well as, personal. But then again, it's not necessarily real. So it might be because the conditioning that we have in our mind says that, okay, if I say that, it's going to be the wrong thing to say, so let me not say it. However, if you do express it, you will find that people around you are more than open to hear you, to be with you, to champion you, and so on and so forth. So most of the times we're doing this to ourselves. We're keeping ourselves small, we're keeping ourselves invisible, we're keeping ourselves alone. So
yeah, we are. It's that separation, and some of it is because you think, well, even if I can find the words, no one's going to understand. They haven't been through what I'm going through. They haven't, they won't understand, my feelings. There's all these things and of course, these are just one story after another story after that you keep on ramping up till you feel so distant from others that it's almost like, how could I possibly take this? Is now like this mounting. How could I possibly take this to someone? And why should they be interested anyway? And I think this is where, when we start looking at the judge, so when we start looking at the saboteur of the judge, who kind of like jumps into this and is like, oh, yes, they're feeling bad. Let me ramp this up for them because this is my job. The judge is brilliant at helping us to criticize ourselves deeply. And so, the judge voice starts to come in and just says, well, no, you shouldn't tell anyone. In fact, you should be embarrassed to tell people. That's the sort of thing you should keep to yourself. So that feeling of, oh my gosh, I'm an awful human being almost starts to kind of embed itself in you, and it just makes you become quieter, and like you said, you become smaller, you start to feel invisible, and I think with a lot of these things it always comes back to, if I feel embarrassed or ashamed or guilty, these are not the things I want to talk about. I'm not going there. So of course you hold it all in, you suppress it, and then that in and of itself starts to create feelings in your body. So you start to embody that, which immediately just brings you further and further away from people. You just start pulling out. But what you're seeing, and sometimes what you're telling yourself is, why aren't people talking to me? Why aren't people noticing? Why suddenly now it's all external? Why are these things happening, and why aren't people noticing? When actually it's your behavior and your thought patterns and your feelings that are pulling you away from everything. And even when people do perhaps ask or try to ask, they understand that something's not quite right. How quick are we to say, oh, I'm fine, oh, I'm okay? And so what do we want people to do with that? Because that's a really difficult thing to navigate if somebody is clearly not okay, but they're just going to keep on telling you they are because they don't want to have the conversation.
Absolutely. And any person, generally speaking, is like more likely not to want to, I don't know, like like tell you, and I'm losing, I forgot the word that I want to use there, but like to impose in what you're saying. And when you are, keep saying that, no, I'm okay, I'm all right, I can handle it. I've always handled it alone, so yes, I'm going to handle it again. It does push people away, and it sort of gives me this visual of the two boats, like the one boat might be like on the harbor and the other one is coming in. But however, if you are in the one that doesn't move, you think that the one that doesn't move moves because of the perspective. And I think that's what it is. We are like, we tend to make other people the ones that are doing the deed, let's say, instead of ourselves. And that causes that disconnect that you were saying, Yvonne, earlier. And
Absolutely.
it is a sad state to be in. And of course, because you don't talk about it, you don't find out that there are a lot of people out there that are feeling the same way.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely, yeah. It's all of those feelings, as with anything. It's not even if you're in a good state. It's the amplification of it, and before you know it, you are, And you just mentioned the water there, so I'm just saying, but literally feel like you're drowning in it, and you don't feel a part of. You don't, nobody's going to listen to you even if you've got anything to say. So now of course, you finished judging yourself and ripping yourself apart. Now it's time to rip everybody else apart. No one's going to listen. They're not interested. If they gave a damn, they'd notice anyway. They'd be talking to me, blah, blah, blah. So now it's everybody else's fault. So now we have that going on. And as I said before, and then before you know it, you're blaming circumstances. I wouldn't be in this position anyway if I had more time to go and spend with people and people, and I had more time, yeah. But these voices and these stories end up on this loop, and it's this loop that we get caught up in that stops us from making the changes that are necessary. Because ultimately, with anything, if you want something to be different, then you need to be prepared to do something different. The work is what you're prepared to do. Now, don't get me wrong, you may think, there are times when I am alone and I want to be alone. Absolutely. That's a very different thing, though. There are times when I like to be alone. That's when I want to have my own space and I just want to be with my thoughts and my feelings. And that's a different I am alone to this I am alone that we're talking about, because this is really coming through feeling disconnected from others, feeling disconnected from yourself even, and possibly disconnected from the world around you. And that is a really that's a painful feeling to have. And I say painful because you will probably feel it in your body. You will feel it somewhere in your body. It will be showing up. So I guess, and as I said, the judge will amplify all of those feelings because it's there to criticize you, it's there to criticize others, it's there to criticize life and to magnify it. So with all of that said, Evie, what do you think are some of the ways that we kind of break through this pattern when it's the judge that is bringing all of this heavy criticism to us?
Well, it is, I think that the most important is to actually address it. Don't just, walk around it thinking that that's okay. If it makes you feel uncomfortable, you need to address it. Because obviously there are moments, and it is very healthy to want to embrace your aloneness, because you're learning through that, you're growing through that, and it's okay. But when being alone doesn't feel right, then there's something there, and that's what is the first step. Like putting your finger on it and saying why. And what is the story that I'm saying to myself now that makes me feel so uncomfortable? And when you start doing that, in essence, what you're doing is, getting out your sage in a way, getting out your own wisdom and listening in carefully and finding out why you feel that feeling, and if it is coming from the inside or if it's coming from the outside, or what it is. 99% of the time it will be coming from the inside. So and that's a good thing as well, because I mean, if it's coming from the inside, and that's how I always find the gift in these things, is that I can control it. If it is coming from me, my God, this is fantastic, because I can do something about it. If it is external, well, you know, what can you do? There are things that we cannot control, and it's absolutely fine. We're human. Okay, so
Absolutely.
yeah, I think that first thing for me, it's that explore of the sage. I would go
Yeah.
into that.
Absolutely. And I think following on from that, because yes, it's, you know, giving yourself permission to pause and do that exploration. You know, what is going on? Why, you know, why am I feeling these things? What is it that needs attention? Because generally speaking, it's a message that something needs your attention. So giving yourself that time and space to explore, but then also following on from that is empathizing. You know, coming back to that place, which again is another sage move here, you know, getting to that place of empathizing and actually being gentle and kind with yourself. I cannot think of how many times I say to my clients when I hear them speak really harshly about themselves and to themselves, the importance of empathizing. And quite often, you know, it's that thing that works that, you know, if it was your friend and they were saying, what would you be saying? Which is a completely different dialogue to the one that they use on themselves. I'm like, so what is it that your friend has that is worthy of that love and attention and that gentleness and that kindness that you're not? Oh, well, no, because you're just used to beating yourself up. So for me, it was like, be compassionate with yourself. You know, even when you've done the exploration and you may be able to pinpoint things, then be kind and say, okay, you know, you don't then start beating yourself up because you've pinpointed things. That's not the way to go. It's then being able to have that compassion and that kindness with yourself, and understanding that that narrative is just being blown out of, you know, I say blown out of proportion, but it's just being amplified, it's just being magnified. And the more that happens, the kind of deeper you feel it, and the more you retreat, you know, away from what needs to be done. And it's really important to understand what needs to be done. What else do you think, Evie?
Well, when you were talking about, you know, like how you would speak to a friend, I mean, the way that I say it, I say it a little bit differently. I say, well, you know, if you had a friend that spoke to you like this, would you be friends with them for long? I doubt it. Or you would be like, you know, they would come from the one side and you'd be running from the other. Probably, I mean, that's how I would do. At the end of the day, yes, you want your friends to be realistic with you. You want your friends to tell you, you know, the truth, but you don't want your friends to be brutal with you. And what we do to ourselves is actually sometimes be
Yes.
really brutal. And I think that's what triggers also those the sense of you know, the imposter syndrome and all these things that we hear our customers or our clients have, is because they cannot believe their own worth. They don't want to see their own worth. They don't want to see what, you know, other people see in them. And it is quite a thing and quite an exercise. And I always ask them to do, when, you know, when you can't see anything right with you, go to your closest friends and tell them, what do they see in you? And then you will see how you're not alone. Because they are the right people to tell you and bring back to your attention where it should be, rather than in that void and where you are spending a lot of your time telling yourself that you are alone and that you're not worth it, because that's basically The one brings the other.
Yeah, and I think actually, and having that, and that's actually a really nice way to position it. Also, you know, if somebody spoke to you that way, how would you take that? What would that impact be like? And I think there's also something about as I think of it myself, and I put myself in the shoes of the person who is. I am alone, and then I've got a million reasons because the judge has given me a million reasons why I should be alone, based on myself, based on others, based on circumstances. That part of that exploring and part of that empathy and compassion is actually saying to them, be willing to be vulnerable, because as I look back, and I think when I had that moment when I was not being vulnerable, I didn't want to talk about it because it felt messy. I felt uncomfortable. I didn't like my behaviors, and so there were a million reasons why I didn't want to talk about anything. And yet, had I given myself permission and cut myself some slack and been more gracious with and to myself and had been more vulnerable, I would have got a lot more help a lot quicker had I done it. Because it wasn't as if I didn't have people around me who didn't care. There were plenty of people around me who cared. There were plenty of people around me who probably could have given me some really good, wise words of wisdom to take away. But I had already retreated into that state of I'm alone. No one understands me. No one's going to get me. And that really was my judge. My judge was running the show. And you know, did I know that at the time? No, I didn't know that at the time. I know that I was telling myself these constant stories of no one's going to understand you. You don't want to talk about that. That's just awful. You know, that's the way it was. So
you sort of find ways to tell yourself why you deserve to be alone, basically.
Indeed.
And that is, I think, the worst story you can tell yourself, because there are a lot of people that will hold space for you, even if they don't give you words of wisdom. I know there are people, I mean, sometimes personally, I don't want to hear anyone, but I don't mind like speaking about what I'm going through. So it doesn't really matter, even if somebody doesn't, give you words. Just to hold space, just to be your sounding board, just to that that they are there for you without judgment, without anything. And I think that is very important, because we're all like humans. I wouldn't say we feed of each other, but we do. It's the energy. It's a good energy that keeps us going, and that can make us feel much better about ourselves and what we are pursuing anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And I think another part of that is about, seek community. So if you're in a place where you think, I do feel incredibly alone, and I have got people around me, but they just don't get me, or they don't understand me, or even when I try to talk about something, they put me down, or they put it down, and therefore it's just I just don't bother anymore. And all of those types of conversations can just drive you further and further away from connection. So that's when it's really important to strengthen connections. Look for the communities and the places where you can be, where you can show up and be fully you, whether you're having the most brilliant day on the planet or the worst one, and that people are not there to judge you. They're there to hold, just like you said, Evie, hold space. They don't have to give you the answers. You're not looking for answers, but they are holding the space. Because actually, when you find that kind of space where nobody's going to try and fix me, because I don't need fixing, right? But they're just going to let me get off my chest what's on my chest, and I know that once it's out, I will feel better, and I will probably then have more access to my sage and the clarity that I need to take the steps that are required. That is such a valuable thing to have. So you've got to give yourself permission to find that or those connections where that can happen. I mean, that's one of the reasons why we set up Permission to Thrive, right? That's, one of many reasons. But that in of itself is that sometimes in midlife, it's really difficult to be able to say, I don't have all the answers, or I don't know this, or I'm not feeling great, or, it's difficult because it's like you're midlife. You should know what's wrong with you. You kind of almost have that external conversation coming in, again, driven by the judge. And that's not okay, because it doesn't matter where you are, what stage of life you're at. When do we have all the answers? But by coming together and allowing ourselves to explore together, we can probably find lots of solutions and answers to lots of things. And there may be some things that we don't, but that's okay too, because at least we've discussed them. At least we've talked them through. At least we've got this safe space where, do you know what? I came away. I don't really know if I've got the answer that I need or that I want, but I feel relieved because I've just been able to express myself fully. And that in and of itself releases me from that feeling of being alone, of being one person out on their own.
Yeah, I mean, you did mention it. It's like at the moment we release all this, it gives us the capacity to actually be a bit more resourced and understand where we're coming from and what we need to have a different story, and to go with that, a different story that serves us more, and that can be so much better for the people around us as well. Because I mean, the one thing that we haven't touched on, and I see it quite a lot, is that when we just go down in that downward spiral of I'm alone, it doesn't only affect you, it affects the whole, the people around you. Because I mean, you feel helpless, but they feel helpless because they want to help and they don't know how.
Exactly.
So I think that by having that space and being able to express, to see that you're not alone in your thinking, and in, you're not alone in how to make it better for you, then it makes it better for everyone.
Yeah.
And I think that's another thing that we really want to do in our community.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. And as with all of the saboteurs, I mean, we always remembering that, like, the judge is like the underpinning. It is like the boss of the bosses, right? It's it's like the super sleuth of, anyway, it's a really difficult saboteur. But once we recognize it, and once we understand how it works, and once we understand how it's driving the judgments we make on ourselves, on others, and on situations, we can actually do something positive about it, which of course is a sage step, the activation step. We can actively do something from a place of understanding, like, I know what's going on now. So there are then things that we can put in place to quieten that voice, to turn that volume down, so that we can access, our own innate wisdom, which we all have.
Absolutely. I think that's a perfect spot to stop the conversation. I think that that really, underlines everything, and that really is the message that we want to share.
Absolutely. So, we're going to explore I Am Alone over the next few weeks through the lens of the different saboteurs, because they all bring up slightly different feelings and thoughts. So it's good to be able to hold up and see them and think, yeah, gosh, I get caught in that comes up a lot for me, and some of them you may think, no, I don't really feel, and that's okay. This is not about, encouraging or wanting people to resonate with every single thing, but there may be every so often a little loop you think, that's a loop that I'm really familiar with. So understanding where it's coming from, and then understanding that you have the ability and capacity to do something about it with the support and encouragement of others, for me, is the gold. And that's really what our work, our collaboration, our coming together is all about, because enough of these loops, enough of this stuff, because it hides our true brilliance and capabilities. And I think we're at a time where, certainly midlife, now's the time. If you haven't felt like you've been shining before, now is the time to shine. So we want to just get these saboteurs completely under control to the best of our abilities so that we can do that, and really just take our brilliance out into the world and fulfill the roles that we have committed ourselves to, that we want to have, with energy, with delight, actually enjoy them and not feel that we're kind of just going through the motions, because that's not living. That's not living.
No, absolutely not. 100%.
Awesome. So, as always, at the end of this video, there will be QR codes. If you want to find out more about mental fitness, if you want to find out more about our community, Permission to Thrive, please scan a code to either myself or to Evie, book a call. Absolutely no obligation to anything other than to have the call, and find out what we're going to be launching, and find out whether it's something and somewhere that you would like to be, so that you can really make the changes that you want to make for 2025, the way that you want to do them, at the pace you want to go. Because I think there was somebody had posted something under one of our videos about, I love the thing that you're saying about not overloading. We're not here to overload. We want to create spaciousness because we know that we need it. So reach out to us and have that conversation. We will welcome the conversation with open arms.
We definitely don't do overload. It's been lovely spending the time with you, Yvonne, once again.
Always, Evie. Absolute joy and a blessing. And to anyone and to those who have been listening and posting little likes and hearts, thank you so much. We really appreciate your interaction, and look forward to seeing you back here next week. Fantastic.
See you later.
Take care.